and I'm going to remove that little icon there. So it's fantastic, first of all, that there's so many of you interested in IBM licensing. And really, I guess where this came from was I was getting asked lots and lots of questions, particularly over the times we've been in, about IBM licensing, and I had a little bit of time, so I decided why not put together a series of webinars and share some of the knowledge, answer some of the questions, and I guess give back a little bit. So a little bit about me. My name is Pierce MacDonald. I'm the founder of License Hawk, and for the last 10 years or so, I have been working in IT asset management, having delivered many, many projects. At this point, I have stopped keeping track of the first 100. I am an IBM license expert, and but I also frequently post on LinkedIn and other places around the net. And really today then is about IBM licensing, and the agenda is going to be, first of all, a quick cover of what License Hawk do, very short. We'll get into the meat of it, which is the IBM licensing itself, and there will be some time at the end for a little bit of Q&A, and it'll take about 35 minutes or so. And throughout the process, I guess before we start, I should say this webinar is being recorded, so I'll edit away all the messing at the beginning. And if you need to drop out midway through, you'll have that. Attendees are muted because there's lots of you, but don't worry. You can post questions throughout in the Q&A box, and at the end, I'll go through those questions and you can add on further. And also, if you think of more afterwards, if you can just email me at info@licencehawk.com, and I'm more than happy to follow up as well. So the agenda, a quick look at us. License Hawk, we're a team of independent license consultants, and we focus exclusively on IBM. We cover distributed, which will be the main topic today. We also do mainframe and cloud. And our mission statement is pretty simple: to help organizations get more value from their investment in IBM technologies. And the kind of stuff we do, or how we help, that'd be what you'd expect. If you receive the audit letter, we can help you negotiate, prepare first of all, and then negotiate a better resolution. If you haven't received the letter but are a bit worried about your compliance, we also can help you there with our pre-audit. EA renewals, we help prepare for those and negotiate through that. And those, I guess, for many in this audience here, which is going to be those managing the licenses, just ILMT, which is the main tool used for managing IBM licensing, and will be a topic in one of the next webinars, helping to install, configure, and actually optimize that. We do a fair bit of IBM license training, and we do lots of Q&A. So we're always happy to answer questions around IBM licensing. So without further ado, let's dive in. Introduction to IBM Licensing Part 1. This is Part 1 of a series we've put together. And really what we're trying to achieve here is to give you a flavor for, as anyone who is, I suppose, been tasked with IBM licensing and wants to get a foundation and to understand some of the phraseology and ultimately know where to go next to investigate this further. The agenda we'll be covering, we'll be taking a look at an overview of the IBM licensing in general. We'll be taking a look at agreements and contracts. We'll be spending a little bit of time there because it's something we want to get you a foundation. We will take a look at Password Advantage Portal, which will become your go-to for anyone managing IBM licensing. We will touch on IBM license metrics. We'll talk a little about resources and hopefully some time at the end then to do some Q&A. So, what's IBM licensing? It covers three broad areas: mainframe, distributed, and cloud. Mainframe is what people historically think of IBM licensing, and that is the Z series, the big box in the corner, typically costing many millions to buy, many millions to maintain, and many millions in software licensing. it's typically doing high volume transaction, legacy products. More often than not, running the ZOS operating system, and it's centralized. You don't lose track of your mainframes. It is a specialized area of licensing, one that will be covered at a later date. Then you've got distributed software, and that's what the majority of we concern ourselves in the licensing and SAM community. It's both server and desktop. It could be any platform. It's decentralized, and it is where we'll be focused on this presentation, and it is very much the current world of IBM licensing. And then, of course, there's IBM Cloud. This is where the future is going for IBM. You're talking about infrastructure as a service, platform, software as a service. The subscription license metric will come into play, and names like Bluemix, Watson, and so forth will get mentioned. But as I said, today we're very much focused on the distributed software licensing in the data centers and indeed at the end user computing side of things. So why is IBM licensing so complex? It's probably the big question we get asked. It's simply this. It is a factor of sheer number of products and parts and complexity. You're talking about many thousands of products, up to 18,000 and more at the moment. Many different combinations of those products. So at this point, easily over 32,000 part numbers. There's a constant change. So even when you think you got your part, you understand that the versions and additions change on a constant basis, and they in turn will change the licensing. So you've got announcements letters, typically 1 to 2 per product coming out every year. And then you've got so many license metrics, up to 250 and counting. We'll touch on some of these later. And then when you mix and match all those combinations, you've got hundreds of thousands of different ways of bundling the different products, all with different software licensing rules. And if that wasn't bad enough, you have IBM constantly purchasing new companies, new products, typically acquiring one company a month, which adds on dozens, if not hundreds of products every year. And then you have divestitures, where products that were supported by them are no longer. Probably the highest profile example of that would be the HCL's, the divestiture to them. Adding all this together, you're essentially creating a highly complex situation that can be hard to get your head around. But we'll start by putting the foundation in here. We start off by looking at the license agreements. And this presentation isn't going to try and cover every combination, but I want to cover the ones that are really the ones you're most likely to encounter and the ones which lay down the foundation for understanding the others. So we start off with the base license agreements. And although there's 4 or 5 of these, the most important one really is going to be the IPLA, or the International Program License Agreement. It is a base license, which means that many other documents, policies get layered on top of that. And one of the very early layers on top of that is going to be the license information document. And we will have a closer look at that later on. But the important thing to understand here is this is a base license agreement, and other documents and agreements will be layered on top of this. When people think about license agreements, it can be intimidating, particularly if you haven't got a legal eye to things. But these agreements are not complex. They're relatively short. The IPLA, which is the main one we consider ourselves, also contains hyperlinks to a number of embedded documents. License information document is one of them. The support renewals one is another, and some of the policy documents are in there. These hyperlinks are something that you will need to keep an eye on as SAM managers and as procurement professionals going forward, because they are dynamic, they're held online, and they can and do change. The next layer then on top of the license agreement is going to be commercial agreements. This is where you start to hear words like Password Advantage Express, and Embedded Software License Agreement. And these agreements are essentially how you buy these products, where the IPLA and license information describe what you're buying. The commercial agreements are all about how you buy it. And again, you have structures here where you hyperlink to other agreements. These are typically the policies and documents, T's and C's, the RSVP program, which is all about your discounting. subcapacity terms, PVU calculations, how notifications are handled, and of course the software life cycles. And these are hyperlinks within these documents. Password advantage, and indeed so does the IPLA, also make reference to the audit clauses. IPLA enshrines the right to carry out audits, whereas password advantage will include detail on how that will be handled and the commercial settlement, because of course the commercial agreement. So then this has laid down your foundation. Next, password advantage is going to be used predominantly to execute larger volume purchases and gives you a little bit of flexibility. Password advantage express is very transactional. The price is the price and you buy it. Embedded software agreements are very much focused on the business partners and where they has service and wrapped around some IBM products. Very often you don't even see the entitlement. This is all, it's included as part of the business partner's offering. On top of this then sits the enterprise agreements, or the ELA as you've heard about it. These are very often just a mechanism for buying large volumes and also for locking in pricing. It also gives you certain benefits along with it. Your standard ELA, though, is a relatively defined document, and there's not that much flexibility. But if you get the more sophisticated and frankly more expensive license agreements, such as Enterprise Unlimited or Special Bid, and typically at this point you're probably spending, your organization is probably committing to 10, 15 million a year, you will get a lot of customized agreements. And as procurement professionals and as SAM managers, you'll need to be thinking about looking at these documents and wondering what are the special conditions that you have negotiated, what are the clauses, exemptions, and flexibility you have managed to get within these agreements. And it is also where you have the most flexibility from a negotiation standpoint. So these layers here gives you a view of IBM licensing agreements, starting at the IPLA, license information documents, moving on to how you buy it, the commercial agreements, and then how do you buy it and pay for support over the long term and for larger deals. So what next? Let's take a little look at license information document. And this is an important part. You'll remember it is the next level on top of the IPLA. And why I want to focus and actually work through an example on this here, as it's on a day-to-day basis, it's one of the most common documents and things you'd have to do as a SAM professional, as a procurement professional. License information document, first of all, it is by product and by version. I cannot overemphasize that. Each version has a different license information, which means that essentially as you upgrade over time, the license information changes and the terms and conditions change. The LI information will also contain, license information document will also contain the program name, the PID, which connects to the technology, use rights, the supporting program entitlement or bundles, which is very important when it comes to optimizing and reducing costs. It also documents limitations and constraints, how you can use things in non-production, definition of the license metric, and of course, any legacy contracts. Now, how do you find this? Well, let's start. Let's take an example, shall we? Take our program name, a version, and go off and look up a very common product called Cognos. I'm going to bring across the screen at this point. So hopefully you'll get to see it on your screen. Just give me a moment. So we type into our URL, IBM license information, and hey presto, we get brought to the official IBM website. You'll know you're in the right place because in a big blue banner across the top, the license information document. We'll scroll down slightly and we're going to search for a specific license LI. And this is exactly what you'll do for all products. In our example here, we kind of know we want to look up Cognos. And we know a version number as well. So we're going to enter that into the URL. And up pops a list of all Cognos products that they can find in the LI page for. As you can see, there are 659 of them. Listing down through them, we now know the particular product, and at the end of each of these is a version number. So if we take, for example, IBM Cognos Analytics User, a very common product out there, this version here is 11.1.6. It relates to the PID 5724W12, which is linked to the software itself. And we know that there was an announcement on the 24th of the 4th this year that we should probably look at. Let's click at it. Once you go in, it'll allow you to confirm your information, and we hit submit. And let's hit that again. And we're into the license information page. Now, these will differ in content for every single product and edition, but the structure is broadly the same. You'll have an opening paragraph describing the product. It'll be confirming both the product name and the PID, and this is what you'll actually see very often in your price file and in your order history. We'll talk about that later. Then we start scrolling down through it, and we start looking at specifications, limited use rights, and a very important one is the supporting programs, because this talks about the programs, first of all, that supports this particular primary program, but you also get included in here any restrictions and constraints. Historically, there wasn't very much. In almost all cases, you will see a paragraph like this appearing on front of all of the supporting programs. And it basically puts in place certain constraints under which you can use these free or bundled products. This particular example here, they're clarifying that if you run this on a separate machine, you must make sure you have licenses for both machines. It's no longer acceptable to just have enough PVU to cover the primary program. You must also have it on this, if you use it on a separate server, you must have enough PVU for it as well. So I guess as a telling point, the supporting programs, you're always looking for the constraints that are around the supporting programs. This example also has some other examples of restrictions. They define the what constitutes the different user metrics, in this case here, authorized user and PVU. It also talks about prohibited components, in other words, products that may be available within that product, but that you must explicitly license. And interestingly here, you have a prerequisite. And as many Cognos users will know, you must have at least one IBM Cognos administrator if you wish to take advantage of this program. So that gives us an example of license information. So let's pop back, shall we, to our screen again. And the reason I wanted to go through that is something that you should be doing on a regular basis, and you should not be intimidated by the information there. It also contains vital information in terms of how it's deployed, and particularly as over the life of a product, as it gets upgraded, changed, moves around, you need to be watching every time a change occurs on one of those products. Have you bent or broken one of the rules in license information? So I just saw a quick question there. I might comment on it. Someone was asking me about what's the main difference between PA and PAX, or Password Advantage and Express. In simple terms, the main differences really are Passport Advantage Express is purely transactional. You get very little flexibility on pricing, and it's typically for small orders. It's a quick way of purchasing a product, and some organizations also get it where they want to do ad hoc purchases. Password Advantage is a more structured one. The major thing it has within it is going to be the discounting, or the RSVP table, which is going to give you far better pricing. And over time, it also gives you the chance to accumulate points to get even better discounts. Outside of that, it's the flexibility as well. You've got you've got no flexibility really within the PAX as a commercial model to buy products with. As you move to enterprise, you get more benefits added in and more flexibility. So I see I'll cover off some of these questions as they come floating in, so just give me a moment. Next I'm going to hit on here is the Password Advantage portal. Now, prior to this, we talked about Password Advantage, the agreement, and the portal is essentially your go-to administration place for managing and maintaining, managing your licenses and understanding what your entitlement is, what's being, and what the changes are. A quick, I guess, reminder though, in terms of a structure with regard to gaining access. If you want to gain access to information around IBM licensing, license information is free, but just about everything else requires an IBM ID. That's something you will register for. Then linked to that, when you start off, you'll have nothing linked to you. You need to link to your customer number, and this is what is assigned to your company or organization. Now, these company numbers can and do change, particularly if there's divestitures, but you'll need to link that to your ID. Then under each customer, there will be PA sites, and these indeed will also have individual numbers. It's important to understand that there's more than one PA site. There can be many of them, and that also that they're treated as separate agreements. And that becomes quite important later when you're dealing with audits and trying to merge and manage the various products you've got. Under each PA site, there's then going to be a whole administration function where you can track your orders, migration histories, download histories, and your proof of entitlement. And then finally, underneath that layer are going to be your part numbers, your Ds and your Es. D refers to, by the way, your first purchase, and E part refers to the S&S that you pay subsequently year after that. So that's just a quick orientation, and let's jump in. Password Advantage. For those of you who haven't looked at it recently, it's had a facelift and looks a little better. And it's divided roughly into about 5 areas. There is the section regarding access to downloads, the software downloads and media access. This is where you go essentially to get patches and get fixes. Very often restriction is constrained here to only the products for which you have entitlement, although if you have evaluation copies, you may also see them in there. The next area you'll be looking at are the purchase and renewals. This is essentially where you look at where quotes, bids have been put in, renewal notices are going to be popping up if you're going to be carrying out some purchases. You'll also get access to the PVU calculator from this point as well. But for most of us managing IBM licensing, it's the reporting section that's probably of most interest to us. This talks about what's active and future entitlements, the order histories, both in terms of what you have purchased in the past and for which you have S&S also in play. Your migration history. This is where products have moved from one Password Advantage site to another. A very common scenario when you're merging divisions or acquisitions or divestiture. And seeing what's the migration history is quite useful for seeing if there's any orphan sites out there or entitlement that you may be able to get. And of course, software download history. This is a tracks and traces all software that within your organization that has been downloaded, evaluation copies, patches and releases. And it is also one to keep an eye on, because if things have been downloaded there that you don't know about as a procurement or SAM professional, it could be an audit risk for you later. And then, of course, the entitlements, which looks at your official proof of purchase, POE, and any allocations you've got. And the last area is more of admin, but it's something we'll touch on here because some of you may not be able to access your Password Advantage. Order history. This is probably the most important document from a management point of view. And I'm just showing you what the screen looks like here to give you an idea so you're not intimidated by it. What I generally say is when this will create a CSV or an XML export, I say generally select everything. You can always filter them out later. The dates set a long way in the past up to the current date, and it run the export. And this will list all of your orders, both in terms of what you've purchased and more importantly, what you have S&S in place for. It will also include things like the quantities, the order dates, and the POs and stuff that it's linked to. Probably the most important report you'll be running on a regular basis, and something you should be checking as well, that stuff that you believe you have ordered or have migrated does indeed show up in your order history. It's an area that we frequently find gaps. And the order history is also by Passport Advantage site. So you could have several of these which merge together, produce your entitlement position. Getting access. You'll remember there was an account management section, and one of the most common, I guess, challenges that we find is that people just don't know who has access. So the person who had it has changed role or has left the company, and you're left wondering, how do I get into this? Well, you can request access, and you can carry out what's known as a self-nomination. And you log into Password Advantage, and you'll be asked to enter in the site number that you're trying to get access to, the business justification. And this email will get sent off then to the current primary or secondary holder of on the account. Now, if you get no answer, which may indeed be the problem, you have two options. One, you can ask your IBM account manager to help, or simply raise a PMR with the IBM support desk to intervene and to essentially add you to the site. Once you're there, you will then be able to access all of this functionality and run off those order histories. So that was a whistle stop of Password Advantage portal. Before we leave there, I just wanted to make a quick comment on Proof of Entitlement, which is an official document. It is usually emailed, literally with the title Proof of Entitlement, to the primary site contact. But don't worry if you haven't been that person with the email. It is also stored going back forever on the Password Advantage site. And it will contain the customer number, the site numbers, and the order number. And this can be particularly useful if you're trying to reconcile with accounts what's been paid out as opposed to what you've been getting in. And it is worth doing these reconciliations. There have been situations where what you thought you bought has gone to the wrong PA site, or maybe out in an orphan PA site you don't know about. So next up, license metrics. Just wanted to touch on these. I suppose the first thing to keep in mind is there are many, many license metrics, and 250 and counting. And as I mentioned, with each acquisition and divestiture, you're going to have more and more of these, I guess, documents. You're going to have more and more of these license metrics accumulating. But there's a few that probably stand out above the rest, which we'll comment on here. The first one is going to be, I guess, first of all, keep in mind that IBM creates categories, and you generally group categories have very common metrics. So the software solutions will all be running PVU and RVU. Middleware analytics will again be on the PVU metrics. You may have an RVU. Authorized user, by the way, covers all of them because generally it's sort of like the Swiss Army knife of licensing. If you need to buy some of it, it'll be an authorized user or one of the user metrics. Within cloud, you're going to be looking at VPC or RVU, and that particular area is actually is changing. Probably the most extreme example there is the Watson, where they're very much looking at transactional based licensing and so forth. But to give you just a high level view, general guidelines before we dive in. When it comes to IBM licensing, less expensive products or editions will always carry restrictions. So if you're wondering, oh, why is this product cheaper than other? Go look at the license information. Chances are it is much more restrictions, or carries less bundled products with it, or you may not be able to use it in the way you want. Common example of that would be production versus non-production. There's nothing for free in the IBM world, I'm afraid. I'd say rarely free. It's more, there's always going to you have to pay for a primary license. You may be able to have secondary licenses, or you may be able to have a extended use, such as in cold standbys. For the most part, you have to pay for everything. An important point also here is that potential use is also a factor within IBM licensing, whereas other clients will allow you to deploy, and unless you actually use it, you don't have to pay for it. In the IBM world, you deploy it, you must pay for it, whether you use it or not. Similar products have similar license metrics. So that just helps in terms of figuring out what's going on. And there are no technical restrictions when it comes to IBM licensing. It's very easy to deploy them and get into trouble. So that's why you have to be watching it on a continuous basis. So the common license metrics here. You've got your PVU, which we'll expand on a little bit more detail later, but it's a processor-based license metric. You have the resource-based license metrics and user-based and the everything else. So PVU, been around a long time, and even for the products that are pre-2006, IBM has essentially evolved or has been moving those products to a PVU-based metric, mostly because it is the easiest to measure and manage, and it's essentially also the most profitable for IBM. The license is linked to the hardware performance, and I'm actually going to go through a worked example of that with you just to show you how that works. There's no license keys. You may have exceptions in the Tivoli world, or not Tivoli world, but in the rational world, but that's typically on a user-based license. And also recent innovation, I guess, from a license perspective is the default. If all things being equal, you're paying 120 PVU per core unless you can prove otherwise. Something to watch out for. So an example. This one's straight from the website, actually, but you've got a processor model. In this case here, the S822. It's got 2 sockets, 8 cores per socket, and the PVU calculation for this here says 70 PVU per core. Multiplied together, you have to come up with 1,120 PVU. If you had deployed that product on a different architecture, on less cores, you pay less. If you deploy it on a more powerful processor and architecture, you pay a lot more. There's also a gotcha within this here as well, in that very often as you deploy on bigger and more cores, the license metrics can jump again. So rather than talking in the abstract, let's have a look at the table, shall we? I'm just going to switch over now, and hopefully we won't get lost along the way. To find or to calculate your PVU, literally Google IBM PVU licensing. So I'm just going to switch across now, and hopefully I don't lose you on the way. So here's what that looks like. And give me a moment while I try and recover my screen. So you've typed into Google PVU processor, and you've arrived on this page here. And there are 2 sets of tables, one for the RISC architecture, one for the Intel. And listed down the page here, you will see the processors, the server model, the sockets, the processor, the model number, and the all-important number of cores on the left. So going back to our example, just give me a moment till I bring it back. We had the Power S822, and when you put that in, the 822 is one of the first ones. You can see, there we go. It's part of these server models. Number of sockets, it's all, so we have no limits here. And we can see across from it, 70 PVU. If I had gone for the so forth, if you were to go down the page to the Intel family, there's pretty much a catch-all here. If it's on the Xeon family, you're on your 70, but as soon as you go above 4, you're into the 100, and below 2, 70, 4, or 100, and above 4, 120. So you get to see how that works. Essentially, you look up the processor, check for any maximum limits, and apply the number. So this becomes very relevant because as you use these products, and as you upgrade, although the license products haven't changed, your entitlement is increasing as you add more and more power to your servers. So that was just that little example. RVU, the resource value unit, and is essentially it's different for every product, and you'll have to go check the license information. The most common example of these really are going to be the backup solutions, endpoint management, so your terabyte metrics, client devices. But to be honest with you, it can be anything. You'll find the details. It's down to the number of resources that is being used, be it storage, be it bandwidth, be it end user devices or endpoints. And the key bit to understand here is, first of all, license information. What is the license metric and how is it measured, is a very contentious area, and does change with each upgrade. To be honest, as IBM learns to get more value from its licensing, the license information document does change. Next up, then, we've got the user-based metrics. This is your authorized user, concurrent user, floating user. There's a variety of these. Authorized user is probably the most common one, and it's very much about licensing the user for access, not usage. This goes back to my point earlier about deployment or making it available does require licensing. And also indirect access is an issue here. So if you have interfaces and products that are indirectly accessing solutions, they must be licensed. I guess the old test here is, if you turned it off, who would be upset and how many of them are there? And you might find that what you thought was 5 or 6 users may indeed have interface users, and it could be turn it off. So everything else, it's simple. Look at the license information document by product and by version. I cannot overemphasize that you must check it by each version deployed, because your environment will be upgrading on a regular basis, and the license metric and the license rules change with each upgrade. Okay, more about that. I guess finally here on the resources. Over on the License Hub website, we have resources, and this will include this particular webinar. Will be up there. And there's also the blog, and we post long articles and to help the licensing community there around IBM. And of course, you'll get the next one of our webinars coming up there. So without that, I guess we're now over to questions. So I'm going to take a drop over to the Q&A box, and I still see there's quite a lot of you here, so please start asking. I'll do my best. You can go outside the scope here, and if I can't answer today, you'll get an answer afterwards, or else it'll be covered in a later webinar. So let me see what we've got here, shall we? I'll run down to the page. So can you use both PVU and RVU licenses for a single product? Yes, you can, but they cannot be used on the same server. They are separate products. A very good example of that would be Cognos. You might license some of the products within that on a PVU basis, such as the information portal products. But other products, such as the administrator or the power users, the designers, on a authorized user model, because they are very expensive license. So moving down then, let me just see what else we've got here. Want to learn more about Mainframe? Follow me up with a separate email on that. That is a different topic for us. This particular webinar is introducing, and the next 3 are very much an introduction to distributed computing and distributed licensing. We do plan to do one, though, on both Mainframe and on cloud. So let me know what you'd like answered in that one. Let's see what we've got here. sorry now, the IBM password. Is IBM password used to manage licenses owner, or can it be used to provide effective license position? IBM Passport Advantage, the portal is for entitlement only. If you wish to manage your effective license position, you will need to merge two things together. The deployment, which is typically from ILMT, or you may be using some of the older TAD4D or Flexera products. That talks about what's deployed. Password Advantage, the portal only talks about your entitlement. In other words, what I bought, what I can do. So you get to put the two together. That's the kind of business we do. So if you want help with it, give me a shout. Can we change the license metrics at the time of renewal? No, it is a product you're bought. You can cancel the product and buy another one, or you can just reduce the amount of SNS you pay. So if you've bought, 10,000 PVU and you only need 500 of it, which doesn't cover a whole lot, that is one way of dealing with it. But you will need to buy a different product. If very often, though, if you're changing, you can do a deal with your IBM account manager, particularly if you're moving to the cloud. They'll be only too happy to change your license metric. Also, very often evolutions where you're moving from an old product to a new product, you get an opportunity there to change your license metric. So let's see what we've got here now. Can you install ILMT on your home desktop for learning? Yes, you can, but you will need to have need an account with IBM to download it. So either through your company account, or if your organization is a business partner, they also have entitlement to download it. And ILMT will run on Windows. The only thing is, it does need big fix data inventory to make it of any use. You need information in there. Next up here, IBM PVU licenses. Oof, these are flying past me here. Give me a second. Will Maximo and how much does matching level? Oof, there's too many questions flying past me here. I'll probably have to just pick some of these out. I'm sorry if I'm not going to cover everyone's today, but I will get back to everyone afterwards in an email. So in the LI document, it is said supporting programs installed on a separate server from the primary one. Do we need to purchase 100 PVU? Depending on the product, if a supporting program has no restrictions in it, which I must clarify, very few of the new LI documents have nothing in it anymore. Historically, they used to. So it would literally give you a list of supporting programs and nothing else, in which case you can deploy them wherever you like. But all of the new versions and additions have wording which basically says, if you install a supporting program on a separate server, and by server they mean either VM or physical, then you must buy separate PVUs for that product. So it takes some of the goodness out of it. Now, very often they can be at a better price, but that's something you have to do the maths on. And you can also very often do a deal with your IBM account manager on it. But the short answer is it's becoming less and less free licensing in that regard if it's on a separate server. Talking about which one is better, ILMT or Flexera. They're very different products. The ILMT is the officially supported one. It's free, which makes it very appealing, but it does need an inventory source, which is typically Big Fix. Flexera is a total enterprise solution covering a whole range of products, so I couldn't comment on that. Either of them are fantastic. They're both accepted by IBM. Now, with Flexera, you need to have a specific agreement from IBM, but that's very easy to get. So can't really comment on that. They're apples and oranges. They both do the same job. Does support program are free for principal programs? No, the primary program you must pay for. The SNS is you have your, when you first buy it, you'll have your SNS for the year, and then you must buy it thereafter. So there's nothing for free in the IBM world, I'm afraid. What's this saying here? Insured as per IBM experience, which one is the best tool for managing IBM lifecycle in terms of compliance? There is no good, it's kind of been, I guess, being smart ass about it here, but the tools are the tools. They're as good as the team running them, and they will literally give you numbers between Flexera and ILMT. It's whatever your organization probably has. ILMT, probably less complex, but is also very restricted. It doesn't cover the same range of products. It's whatever you've got, to be honest. It's a separate question if you're picking SAM tools. Can customers download supporting programs freely with principal programs? You can download anything you like. It's all about deployment. And first of all, you'll need to have the principal program entitlement just to get access to download them. But if you can get access to download them, you need to be just careful about how you deploy and it is check the version and edition, and they change with each version upgrade. Do you need additional license for DR environments for all PVU products or license requirements for only hot? There's a post actually on the website about this. The short answer is there is a policy document from IBM which defines hot, warm, and cold. And so long as you've got the primary program licensed for cold and warm, you're covered, or you have free licenses up to the amount of PVU of the principal program. For hot, you must buy licenses, but you read the definition carefully there around it, and the blog post should help you. Let's see. Are there any tools that can identify data for authorized user license metric? Yeah, Active Directory. For you to have an authorized user on your network, I strongly recommend you just create security groups within Active Directory on a product by product basis, and that is the easiest way to manage them. That way, then you have your list of products there, and most of the IBM enterprise products also have integration with AD, so you've got a belt and braces. Active Directory is where I would manage and maintain all authorized user licensing. If you're talking about the concurrent users, particularly the rational rows, they do have a key structure, but that's a different license entirely, really. Does downgrade rights of primary products apply to the supporting programs? No. The supporting programs change with versions, so you need to check. Right now, they're very version specific, so you need to be very careful about as you move up the versions. Very often, the supporting programs are not supported, or they're significantly constrained. If you buy extra PVU, can they be returned? You've essentially D part and E part here. If you've bought something and you don't need it, this is a conversation to do a deal with your account manager. You can cancel support, which is what most people do, and you just don't pay SNS the following year, or you pay less. Again, if you're moving to the cloud, you can probably negotiate some sort of a trade-in for it. And how much percent can you rely on ILMT bundling? You can't, is the short answer. ILMT bundling has lots of shortfalls. The most common one being that if you deploy products on different VMs, it doesn't pick them up very well. And also, it gets about 67% right the first time, but it misses any of the exceptions within the license information documents. And I typically find that it's there's some products that can be really bad on, and if you do anything unusual in your deployment and configuration, you'll find that ILMT isn't very good at bundling. How can you calculate the deployment of PVU-based products? Well, calculating the deployment is based on the hardware, and we just went through that example there of cores on the hardware, our active cores. Go to the PVU table, look them up, find out what the multiplier is, and that gives you the number of PVUs, and then multiply that by the cost of the product. If you need more detail on that, just drop me an email, I'll help. Let us see what else we've got here. Can we have a separate webinar on cloud licensing? Absolutely. Whole topic there, in terms of cloud migration and dual licensing, and just the whole future of cloud licensing. It's significant. Even within cloud, the whole area of AI there's a whole lot of stuff in there that has to be considered. Will you be sharing the presentation? Yes, I will. So give me a little while to clean it up, though. This one has been changed just before this presentation. And how do you ensure you're doing your bundling correctly? In simple terms, you can run the ILMT and see what it gives you as the best shot. But really, what I find the best thing for you to do is get a spreadsheet, list all your part numbers, go for each of the parts, look up the version you've deployed, the license information, and check off has ILMT identified the product. The other thing to look for also is anything that is just hanging out there unassigned. It's usually an indicator that either you're under licensed or the bundling rules have failed in some way, and you have a chance to manually put those in. There's a lot. Bundling takes a little bit of an art, a little bit of science. So I guess if you have specific questions, specific products, drop me an email. I'll see what I can do for you. I have a specific. I can't answer specific examples on the fly here. I'm sorry. If you send me over the product and the part number in particular, and the version you got deployed, I can help you with calculating these things. And let me just fly down here. Can we do a webinar on ILMT? Absolutely. It is either going to be the second or the third one. We're still deciding if we want to do subcapacity licensing next, and that whole area, because there's so much money involved and so many savings, and we're debating whether we should do both together or not. So watch the space. If it's not covered in part 2, it will definitely be covered in part 3. I guess at that point there, we've probably got everyone tired out, and you've probably heard enough from me. So what I would say here is thank you very much for your time. That's my email address, so feel free to follow up with further questions. You got my phone number if you want to call. I'm easily got on LinkedIn, happy to link with any SAM professional. This is my world, and happy to connect with fellow professionals in it. The next webinar will be at the end of the month, and I guess I hope you'll be there to book. Registration's free again, and thank you very much for your time. I'll hang on for a couple of more minutes here, but feel free to, I'll try and answer a few more questions, but you can all drop off now. You've probably had enough of me. Thank you. So I'll just have a look. If there's any more questions, I'll try and answer on the fly here for the last 5 minutes, all right? And thank you for all the thank yous. Sorry, I'm going so fast. I've had. I'll follow up on a topic that I was going a little bit quick on, because I was aware that I wanted to get this done within the hour, because you've got stuff to be doing. Don't need to be listening to me. You can listen to the webinar in slow anyway after this. And yes, I will be emailing out a recording of this session to everyone. I just need to figure out the best place to put it, because the platform it's running on right now isn't so great at hosting them. It'll definitely be linked to from the resources page on the License Hawk website. Webinar will be the same time, yes. Thursdays, 3 o'clock is every 2 weeks is what I hope to do until I run out of parts to cover. And I'll probably just rerun them all around again, and with a bit more polish. I think that covers it from all of the questions here. I have to say, guys, it's fantastic talking to everybody and seeing everybody. You'll be happy to know, near on 200 of you registered. So this was definitely an interesting one. I shall leave it there. Thank you.